Hey again, everybody. This is Matthew Kent. Welcome to Theology on the Ground, daily thought for my quiet time. 1 Peter 5 today, and talking about Satan, talking about God, talking about God's will, and what it all means for the Christian, what it all means theologically, and then also what it all means for the Christian. So 1 Peter 5, it says, 1 Peter 5:8, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, so you have an enemy, the devil, walks around or prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. And after you have suffered a little while, God, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. To him be the dominion forever and ever. So here's what he just set out. And literally, this is how he did it. He said, hey, you need to fight because you have an enemy. Not only do you have an enemy, but all of your brothers and sisters in Christ throughout the world have an enemy, the devil, that's seeking someone to devour. So you're going to resist him, but you're going to have some defeats. You're going to have some suffering as a result of this battle. And it says, after you've suffered a little while, that God himself is going to come back to confirm and strengthen you. So one thing that we need to realize here is, first of all, we are called to fight on a practical level. That's just the immediate thing that needs our attention, and that's the thing he's telling us about. You're going to have to fight. The devil is going to war with you, and you're going to have to fight. You know, you've got to fight your own flesh. Your own sinful desires. You're going to have to fight temptations from the devil. And the Bible's just straightforward about that. You know, some people might think, oh, well, man, the devils and the angels are really going to talk about that. It just sounds so mythological. The Bible's straightforward about it, and I'm a Bible man. So there you go. So you're going to have to fight. The other thing, though, that's so interesting about this is that everybody else is fighting, but that there's going to be some suffering. The devil's going to get some little wins in there, but God is sovereign over all of it. And so the end of the fight is already written down for us. You're going to suffer a little while, but then God's going to come back and confirm and restore and strengthen you. So what this calls attention to here is what we would call the two wills of God. And I actually just had a post that came out today where I finally went through in depth, about 3,000 words, and explained this concept of the two will of God's will of command and his will of decree. And so his will of command being, and they're both totally supported by the Bible, his will of command being what sort of he wants to have happen. So he doesn't want people to murder, so he gives a command. He says, do not murder. And so obviously he doesn't want Satan fighting his beloved bride. He doesn't want Satan gaining any sort of victories whatsoever. There's a sense in which in his will of command he's opposed to that, and Satan really is God's enemy. But on the other hand, Satan and God are not, sort of these equal but opposite forces that are butting heads, and maybe just maybe if one of them is cunning enough, they can sort of pull a fast one on the other one and ultimately win the fight. The fight was never in question. God is sovereign over all things. God is in control over all things. But God is letting Satan have his way to a certain extent, but God's going to be in control of the final outcome. So Satan's going to come and tempt and attack the children of God, but then he's not going to be successful because God's going to come back and confirm and strengthen them. And there's just not going to be anything Satan can do about that. So in the one hand, you could say Satan is sort of like not a real enemy of God, but more like a puppet and even an instrument that God uses. But on the other hand, you would say, actually, yes, he is a real enemy of God, and he really is opposed to God, and God really is opposed to him. But then in God's sovereign orchestration of all things, God realizes, hey, the best thing is going to be to let him go and have his way for a little bit, and that he will cause some suffering, But then ultimately what I'm going to do is turn that around and then confirm and strengthen the believers. And then I'm going to turn around and judge Satan. And we do read in the book of Revelation that, final judgment, he's cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. So God ultimately gets the victory. God was in control of everything the whole time. But in one sense, it's his will for things to happen that are not according to his desires, which can be spoken of as his will. So in the one sense, he has a deeper, more complex will with the whole story of history unfolding, that, hey, this is how it's going to go, and this is how I'm going to work everything together for good to those who love me and are called according to my purpose. And to another extent, he, in that will allows things that he doesn't like so that they're not according to his will. So we can speak of the same event being both a part of God's will and not a part of God's will at the same time. So for instance, something like cancer, we can say, well, yeah, of course God is sovereign over your cancer. So in one sense, God wills you to have cancer. But we can't make conclusions about the future. We don't know if God wills you to die because of that cancer. God's in control of how many years you get on this earth. So it doesn't mean that because it's God's will that you have cancer now, in one sense, the will of decree, doesn't mean we shouldn't fight and you should just give up and say, well, I have cancer. It's God's will for me to have cancer. So I'm just going to kick the bucket. No. God's will is not for you ultimately to suffer. It's against his will. So you're going to, like you're fighting Satan, you can fight your cancer and you can pursue that kind of shalom and that peace that God intends for all things, that wholeness, that unity, that sort of state of perfection. We can always run after that and fight anything that's falling short of that. We can fight poverty, even though to some extent it's God's will that there should be the poor among us. And hey, my daughter's coming over. And we can fight, disease and illness, whatever we say. So in one sense, everything that happens is God's will, and in another real sense, it isn't. And so you need to keep that distinction in mind always, or you're going to get so confused theologically, and you're going to get into bizarre sort of practicals like, okay, I have cancer, this is the will of God, let's just give up. It's not the will of God. Don't do that to yourself. And of course, when it comes to Satan, yes, Nora, we hear you and we love you. That's my daughter making noises. When it comes to Satan, you're going to fight. You're going to fight. And the Bible tells you you're going to need to fight. So there's a lot packed in today. I'm going to link to the post. And Lord willing, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Blessings.